Best. All right, we are at 5 o'clock, so I am going to officially get started. I know people will be continuing to stream in, but it is my pleasure to, you guys, it's SLO, right? Not SLO.
Yep.
SLO.
Yeah, SLO Architecture. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself and just get to it. We're really excited about this, especially since I've had a preview and I know what's coming. So go ahead, introduce yourselves, and then I'm going to drop the screen so you guys can share yours whenever you are ready. Welcome.
Yeah. Hi, welcome. Thank you so much. It's great to be here at Untapped Cities. Thank you so much for having us here. We've known Untapped Cities for a long time. You've covered a lot of our works over many years since 2013 Harvest Dome. And we also love getting the daily emails covering the gems of New York City, and not only the gems, but also their context within the city. We might be taking a bike ride one day, and then the next day we open up Untapped Cities and there's a coverage of that neighborhood, and we start to learn about the city in new ways. And we think of our own work in that kind of contextual way. So we're really excited to be here. You know, architecture and how it fits into the city. So the way Untapped Cities thinks about New York is the way we think about New York, and it couldn't be a better place to be talking about our New York City projects.
Awesome. Yeah, you are our people. That's very true. You are our jam.
We can say that you guys have accompanied us on many of our voyages too, on boats, on bikes, walking, canoeing. So it's amazing. It's amazing to see you guys in this virtual world.
So hello to everybody today. Today we're going to go on a virtual tour of New York City from the Bronx all the way to Brooklyn, to Southeast Brooklyn, Ocean Parkway. So we're going to start here. I put who can share. So when I'm ready to share screen, what do I do? I go
Just
like this.
Hit share screen at the bottom. It's the green. There you go. You're good.
Perfect.
Okay, so in thinking about our work, when we look at, thank you. Okay, so when we're looking at the 21st century city, New York City, and we're looking at the legacy of the 20th century, some of, let's say, maybe the negative aspects, contamination, a loss of our ecology, congestion. And we think to ourselves, how can we reclaim some of this, reclaim our city from these things? How can we find new ways to find new public space and rediscover our city based on our needs for the 21st century? Now, I think a lot of people during this COVID time already have been thinking about that. We spent so much time outdoors in the last few months, and we start to think about what is public space in New York and how can that affect the way we interact with others. You know, all of a sudden we're eating on the curbs, a place that we never thought of as a gathering space. So
Right.
when we go and we think about New York City and new projects in architecture and public architecture and also in private architecture, we want to ask ourselves, how can we make the city a better place to interact and meet people and mitigate issues of contamination, of congestion, and mitigate the negatives and find space to be together?
That's right. Another way to think about it too is that what makes a public space that you may not even know as public space becomes something that you want to use every day, that it unexpectedly becomes part of your life. It could be a waterway, it could be a river, it could be a mud flat, it could be the backyard of someone's house that is along a river in the middle of a city that has been used by industry for 100 years and now is not being used by anyone, and is filled with spare tires, for example. So the idea of, you know, like what the situation is called détournement, right? A rerouting of existing elements towards unexpected ends. The idea of using a space that you didn't even know, you're unlocking it, like Untapped Cities tries to do every day in their work. You're trying to unlock this unused space for new ends that make city life more, you know, worth living.
Right, so here's, we're gonna start with the first project called Bronx River Crossing. It's the first project we realized after returning to New York City, after being away for many years. And here what we were doing was trying to think about the borough of the Bronx beyond entrenched concepts of the neighborhoods as they were, divided by highways like the Cross Bronx Expressway. How could we bring people together across neighborhoods? And what we decided to do is let's look at the Bronx River as a spine, as a public space, and a spine that could bring people together and let people start to think about their neighborhoods differently and the connections of those neighborhoods differently. So here you see us on the river.
Canoeing with the people that we worked with, and we'll be getting into more detail soon. What you're seeing is a huge floating effigy of the lower Bronx River watershed. It's about 30 feet long and 12 feet wide, and floating atop 200 2-liter bottles. And we're in a flotilla of canoes together. Many of the people who worked on the piece, all ages, high schoolers, college students, metal fabricators, canoeists. And we're going down the Bronx River. Someone was standing on the 174th Street Bridge looking down at this.
So the idea is, for many years, okay, let me, trying to get this to turn.
You have to go there.
Oh, here we go.
There we go.
Okay. So for many years, the Bronx River was a place that was filled with tires. It wasn't a place that you could actually navigate. And in the years previous to our trip, the Bronx River Alliance had worked with many people in the neighborhood. It was already a place that people were trying to bring back to life, cleaning the river and making it a place that people could discover by canoeing it, kayaking it. So what we did is we built on that, what people were already doing in that neighborhood, and we said, let's get to know this place. We brought together 4 teams along the high schoolers and architecture students at Columbia, New Jersey Institute of Technology, and Fordham to study the river and make a watershed model. So a model of 4 sections of the watershed. This is the shape of the watershed, and I'm going to turn on the pointer. And this is the shape of the watershed along the Bronx River. So you can see Manhattan is here. This is Central Park, and this was going to be our first journey. But the watershed model itself is the shape that you see here, and this was the model that they were going to be building. So we set up in 4 different locations. This is YMPJ. We printed out the street grid really large, kind of like a Sanborn map. And in each group, they put it on the wall or put it on tables, and then they were going to start to build the actual model in layers of the original ecology, the built ecology, the built settlement, and try to see that area in layers. Then when the 4 groups came together, we brought it to a big warehouse in Port Morris, and we set it on top 200 soda bottles, 2-liter soda bottles, getting ready to float it down the river.
What you'll find is that the model is made up of things we collected in the watershed. So if the lower Bronx River is the spine of that watershed that runs down the middle of this model, which is at scale, we found things on job sites. For example, these window frames that had been tossed and piled up. The window frames became the rails on which we slid all the 2-liter bottles to create the flotation at the base of this raft. So it's like a huckleberry fin raft that we made to sort of free ourselves up and go down the river together.
And then with the Bronx River Alliance, we got a lesson on how to canoe and safety on the river before we set out.
I guess it would be good to say that the night before, with our model in tow, we slept in tents. We camped out in the Bronx River forest with the urban park rangers of New York City Parks and Recreation.
So that we'd be in the mood, so we'd feel like we were really there, not just arriving quickly by subway. And then we set up the model in the river, the 4 parts, we put it together. So the river is very low here at 180th Street at Drew Gardens. And here you can see the model aerially. So you get a little sense of you know, what it looks like. The 4 sections are quite different. Here, this is the salt marsh section. Students used net bags with leaves underneath to show the ecology, and then Tropicana cartons to cut out the street grid. Then you have Metro cards here in the upland section, and you have the elevated line, the river, and then you have the elevated line of the
6 train.
Of the 6 trains, and then the black piece is the Cross Bronx Expressway, the different highways that pass through and cut the river.
Right, so carrying an effigy of the watershed down the watershed, the middle of the watershed, sort of helps you see the concept of the togetherness of this whole region of an ecological zone, and brings together the neighborhoods on either side of the river in your mind and in reality.
Right, and for us it was especially important to now get this water's eye view, to really, you know, this was like a first, it was a project in and of itself, but it's also a way for us as architects and also the people in this project to really get to understand their neighborhood differently, not only by making something, but also by seeing the river from the water's eye view, right? So you start to see the backs of things, you start to see the city inside out, to understand how the urban context is put together. For example, even most literally, car parks places, you're low down and you're looking at them from behind. So it's kind of like coming at the city from behind to understand it anew.
Right, like peeling back the curtain on the spectacle and actually living in the function of the spectacle rather than the front face of the spectacle.
And here we pass by a column, a column that was supposed to be part of an additional off-ramp
For the Sheridan Expressway.
for the Sheridan Expressway. It was never built. So that loop was never built, but the column was made and it's in the water. And here it is as a monument. So it's kind of this monument to the future in that
never was.
That never was, but now it's our opportunity. It's kind of this monument to possibility. So here we are, and it becomes this piece that we canoe around, and you can think about it as this this focal point for new public space. So it's creating a new plaza, the plaza of the column and the monument that never was. But that's great. It creates a place and new possibility. And then we start to see the infrastructure that we go through. This is the Amtrak bridge that goes up to Boston. You usually see it from the inside. Now we come and we're seeing it from the outside. So you're seeing the infrastructure inside out.
Here's us underneath the rail bridge. It's a very low bridge, particularly at higher tide. And you're compressed. It's a compressed space. So talk about public space. This is a very particular moment. It's a contemplative moment with the ballast dropping on you when the trains go by. It's really beautiful. Oh, and now I would like to say that as we go south on this river and get closer to different parts of the lower Bronx, these are kind of the bridges become our triumphal arches, right, on unexpected boulevards. Here we are. We're walking through. We're having a stroll down the middle of the Bronx, the Grand Concourse that is not the Grand Concourse.
Right. So here you have the 6 train up above here. That's the 6 train that crosses over this bridge, and this is Westchester Avenue. So these are 2 triumphal arches that we paddle through as we make our way down. And as we make our way down, we pass this beautiful ruin. What is this piece that we're going by? We move in closer and we notice the terracotta and steel lattice work of Cass Gilbert. The 1912 station, designed in 1908 by Cass Gilbert, the architect who designed the Woolworth Building, Union Station in New Haven. What is this? Well, we'll find out in a minute. First,
let's park our lower Bronx River watershed raft at Hunts Point Riverside Park, looking over at Sound View, and then we can get back to the railway station we found.
Right. So this is the end of that maiden voyage. Later, we would try to take it down the East River, which was difficult because we started to get to know the tidal waves of the East River. But now let's go back to this idea about Westchester Avenue. So one thing that was interesting to us with Bronx River Crossing is that it really opened up new avenues, new ways of thinking about things, right? All of a sudden, we started to see, we discovered this station and we started to see it from the point of view of the river, right? Very different than coming about it if we were coming about it from land. And here, just to talk briefly about the Westchester Avenue Station project, because this is a project we started in 2011, and we continue to work on it with the Bronx River Alliance and Youth Ministries for Peace and Justice. It's an ongoing effort to restore and rehabilitate this station.
And make it for the new infrastructure of the Greenway, the Blueway, and the Waterway.
Right. So here we have a drawing of what the station originally was. You really get a sense of it. It had a head house on the street, a waiting room that was perched over the tracks, and then a bridge that took you down to a street. Okay. And so you had like a masonry structure, a steel lattice with terracotta, and then the steel bridge. And just to give you a sense, the red line
was J.P. Morgan's New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad that then, I guess, it went defunct in the 30s.
That's right, because it went to New Rochelle and then eventually, obviously, to Hartford. But the main line, there were stations from he planned stations from New York to New Rochelle. And what we started to realize is this train line doesn't exist anymore. Once the subway started to work, there was no need for these intermediary stations. Though now, actually, Amtrak is thinking of possibly bringing them back, which is interesting.
For the MTA, actually.
For the MTA
is doing.
But we started to realize, having worked on the Bronx River crossing model, that there was a new network that was opening up. And this was the Bronx River Greenway, which you can see in the green, and it intersects just at this moment at Westchester Avenue. So we started to see, okay, we can have this network transfer. And this was something we were able to discover by experiencing the Bronx River. Here's a picture of the station from
Westchester Avenue.
From Westchester Avenue, from the ground. Okay.
Here's what it looks like now. A winter ago. It's been abandoned since the 30s and really has not been used. It's been sitting there, kind of a shell of itself, waiting for a future. Waiting to become part of the new infrastructural network. Right,
and now there's this park here, it's called Concrete Plant Park. So there's a new opportunity. That's part of the Greenway idea, right? So you have the Blueway, which is the river, and then right now there's also a park here. So the question is, you see it's so close. It's practically touching, and it used to come here. This was the street that it came to. So how do we remake this connection, right? This piece from the past, from the history, is looking to reconnect itself with the future of the Bronx River.
Right.
How do we bring past and future together here? And here's another view. We're in the park. Just a few weeks ago, we went and we went inside.
We did a structural evaluation with a structural engineer.
So you can see, and you see some of the detail. There is a lot of while the structure seems to be crumbling, there is a lot of detail. So here you see NYH, that's the New York, New Haven, and Hartford rail line. There is a lot of beautiful detail still existing in the building, though every time we go, we say, okay, we have to move quickly on this, because
it's gonna be nothing by the time we're ready.
Right, but obviously there are many issues, and we want to make sure that it's something that will be used by the community, that it comes from the community, and that it will be useful, that it won't just be fixed up, but that it actually responds to the needs of the site itself.
Here's our interior visit with the structural engineer, looking at what's left inside. Some beautiful moments, actually. Head house.
Yeah, so just to explain the concept of this network transfer, right? So if once this station house was part of a train line, the red, now our proposal is, let's bring it, even literally,
to the water.
To the water.
Well, yeah, so this is looking south at Concrete Plant Park, which is a previous really phenomenal way to use monuments of the industrial past of the river. This was a concrete mixing plant that went abandoned as part of the post-industrial time on the Lower Bronx River. And they were kept in the landscaping in this recent project in the late 90s all the way up into the early 2000s to make a park, which is right next to this station. So we're looking in the distance at these monuments of the former concrete plant that were retained and part of their follies in the park. And now they're there are actually Bronx River Line does these frequent excursions on the river in canoes and kayaks. So we figure that this station can become an incredible node of that new desire to use the waterfront for local enjoyment of kind of the wilderness embedded in the city that hasn't been unlocked yet. Yeah, here it is seen from Westchester Avenue Station, the actual, Whitlock Avenue Station of the 6 train, elevated 6 train looking down at it at the Sheridan Expressway and the various roads, looking north.
Right. So what's also very interesting about this site is it's really a corner of transportation. Every means of transportation is located here. It's a very busy moment. But how do we take that and make that a moment of enjoyment as well? Right? You have the Sheridan Expressway, the 6 train. So there's a lot going on. A lot of pieces of the city are coming together. The Bronx River is another moment of that city, of movement, of coming together. It's a working river as well. There's metal recycling. There is a working concrete plant. So how do we bring these all together to this monument, this Cass Gilbert station with its pedigree and its beautiful detailing? How do we make that a moment to stop and enjoy and use this space? And this really gives a sense. We have a video online. It's called Bronx River Right of Way. We recommend that everybody look at that if you're interested in this project more. It tells a little bit about the history of this site through time. I mean, because this corner is so interesting for really having so much going on right now. I think there are very few corners in the city that have so much movement. So how did it go from, you know, just the pure ecology to this moment of movement? And then how do we bring that back? How do we bring the ecology? How do we lodge it back in there without getting rid of the movement? Because obviously transportation and connectivity is also part of the city. So how do we bring them together?
Right. How do we bring back the enjoyment of the nature of the space without making it some kind of luxury leisure space that doesn't have any of the other things that are absolutely necessary for the city to function?
And on that note, I think we had a several year, continuing on the water connectivity, we had a several year project, Harvest Dome, that took us first in the Bronx and then from Brooklyn to the
northern tip of Manhattan.
Yeah, and then back to Gowanus, back to Brooklyn, where we really started to look at the waterways as a public thoroughfare that we could not only look at, not only enjoy as kind of a leisure commodity, but be a part of. And at the same time, understanding the waterways as a working area, much like a street, that people are moving, they're commuting, and at the same time, people can stand in the street and actually enjoy and sit and eat on the street, right? So how do we start to enjoy these waterways as public space and start to think about how we connect to people via these waterways?
So here's where the Harvest Dome was born in this iteration. This is Harvest Dome 2.0. We were in the Brooklyn Navy Yard over the summer, building outside on the waterfront, and we were building night and day in the summer, so very long days into the night sometimes, and we were next to piles of gravel that are one of the constituent elements of the concrete that form the buildings of the city, right? All the construction in New York City, the roads, the buildings, all these, all the concrete, the gravel is brought from overseas, from Canada, from the Pacific, and they come in 50,000-ton vessels with gravel, and they pour them onto these long piers that right next to where we were working. So it's definitely a working environment.
Right. So as we were working on the dome, which we'll tell you about in a minute, you know, this Alice
Oldendorf
from
right.
Madeira came to bring more gravel. So we saw this in action. We were part of this kind of working waterway.
Right, and it's kind of funny for those who are like Charles Lutwidge Dutz and AKA Lewis Carroll, and the idea that the boat is called Alice and that the tug was called Charles. I thought that wasn't lost on me, at least. So here they are together, Charles and Alice, pouring gravel.
And here we are making and completing the dome, which was made from discarded umbrella frames and refuse umbrella frames. Kind of an accumulation of the debris
of the city. We were finding them after rainstorms and picking them up off city streets, and it's about 450 umbrellas, I'd say.
Yeah. So that was kind of the concept. We were making it as an architectural idea to bring to one of the last remaining salt marshes of the city. But in the process, what was interesting in the way that we went about the project and brought it up to the site, we started to learn about this process of what the waterway was, about the working waterway. So we were making this architectural piece, and in the end, it ended up being almost an industrial piece, or part of the chain of events that creates architecture in the city from the smallest piece of gravel.
Right, so again, we brought together people like we did with Bronx River Crossing. We had high schoolers and summer youth employment program working with us to build the dome. We had college students, we had grad students, we actually had experts in woodwork and metalwork, pipe benders, even the fire department, the New York City Fire Department's Harbor Patrol was stationed right next to here, and the guys would give us occasionally a wrench or a bolt.
In fact, they are the most organized of anybody I've ever seen. They had drawers of screws and nails of every size. So actually, they became very interested in the project as we were building it, and they could help us more and more as time went on after we saw that they had absolutely everything. So they were really fun to work with. Then we had Miller's Launch actually bring the barge and tug, help us bring it to Inwood on top of a barge. So here is the process of rigging the dome.
Lifting it, and then putting it on the barge and going north.
Right, so here we are on the barge, and so we are like a working barge. The East River is a working river. It's something we pass every day, actually, as we bike over the Queensboro Bridge to our Long Island City office. And here we were experiencing it from that level, the East River, then the Harlem River, making sure we could fit under the bridges, right? We had to do that height calculation.
When we were making the piece.
Here we are, we just fit. Luckily, this time we fit. Later we may not fit. And to explain where we were going, this is the northern tip of Manhattan. And we were bringing it up the Harlem River.
And dropping it in, well, stopping nearby because it became a mud flat, a very, very shallow mud flat, depending on the tide. So the barge stopped shy of the inlet. And then we had to do a kind of, I would almost call it like a space station lock-in with our local astronauts.
And here we are, ready for the lock-in with the Inwood Canoe Club. So one thing that we do when we go around the city, it's about finding the people that are there, the experts that are there, and working with them and to understand the space better, right? This is a mud flat. To explain back here, this is mud, and then with the tide, it goes up to 6 feet of water, so twice a day with the tides, right? So this is the original ecology. This ended up in the blue being cut to allow ships through, but still in that little inlet, you have the sense of the mud flat, and that's something we wanted to bring out.
I think it's the last original existing mud flat of Manhattan.
So here we are dropping the dome in. Inwood Canoe Club is helping us unlock it.
And canoe it into place with some people on land towing.
We put in the anchors. Look up at it, it's finally in sight.
And here it is at low tide. And we have some other spectators, the ducks that come to eat their detritus, not the cast off umbrellas, but to eat their food here. They find it in the exposed mud flat. They find all sorts of goodies, and they walk around and eat around the dome.
Right, and you can see how it sits on the mud flat. Yeah, they enjoyed it. The ducks enjoyed it. And then finally, we decided we were going to take it further. We were going to take it to Governor's Island and then the Gowanus. So we had the tug pick it up again. At this point, we became experts in how to hoist a dome onto a barge.
And then we went downriver, past the Queensboro Bridge.
Right, so again.
And here we are at Governor's Island looking at the south end of Manhattan, trying to get this dome off the barge and onto the island, Governor's Island. Carrying it, we carried it over our shoulders. It's between 700 and 800 pounds, correct? So we were carrying it over our shoulders. We had enough people and we were able to maneuver it.
And we carry it onto land. And then a few months later, it's fall. Here we are.
Admiral's Row.
And we're ready to bring it back. We figured out how to put it on wheels this time, so we wouldn't have to carry it. We wheeled it back to the gantries, and Miller's Launch picked it up again and helped us bring it to through the Buttermilk Channel and onto Gowanus.
Here's one of the people working with us, Sharif, on a working barge. It looks like we're on our way to the Buttermilk Channel here with those gantry cranes.
Right, so there's this kind of question, what is this? Is this a working picture? Is this a leisure picture, right? How do we go about understanding our city and the waterways when we're making architecture that's along the waterways, that's for the waterways? How do we understand the programs, the possible programs?
The unexpected programs, yeah, agreed.
Just to explain, going around the Gowanus.
Here's
Governor's Island. We go around and up through what used to be the light blue. What you see here is
another wetland.
Another wetland, but now it's all become land, and the Gowanus Canal is cut like a line through the land like that. So this is where we were going to bring it. Again, now we have to use the
schedule of the working river, which is a 9th Street bridge, which needs to be lifted by a schedule. So we had to schedule in advance, wait for the bridge to be lifted, and then make our way through.
Yeah, this time we weren't going to fit underneath. Miller's Launch, letting it up because we can't go in. We can't go in all the way to the Gowanus Canal. There are many barges along the way, so there's no room to bring it all the way to the 3rd Street turning basin where we would be meeting the Gowanus Canal Conservancy.
So we drop it in the river, in the canal rather. And then we had to tow it the rest of the way with canoes and with people walking on land all the way into the 3rd Street turning basin. Here's a shot of us nearly there. Concrete plant to the left, bus depot to the right, and onward to the turning basin beyond. And this is a balloon photograph taken by us from canoes, looking down at where we put it in the turning basin, and our dome locked horns for, I guess, 2 years with a sunken vessel in the 3rd Street turning basin. So it sat there and would sit on top of it at low tide and then rise above it at high tide, kind of marking the sunken vessel, past, future, present, all compressed.
Right, and then this is just a map that will show you, that kind of explains the voyages of the Harvest Dome. The first dome that actually landed on Rikers Island, and then the second dome, what we've showed you here. But what's interesting about this project is that it's thinking about the city, everything but the grid. We normally move around the city on a grid, and here we were moving around the city in an inverted sense along the rivers, and started to understand that. And it starts, well, it looks like it's natural, but actually it's also engineered.
Yeah,
right.
engineered.
So
you have to keep peeling back the layers to find nature. You have to make a tremendous effort to find the nature in your inside-out voyage.
Right. So, and that's kind of what we're looking to do. We're trying to say, okay, what is the original ecology of these places? What do we have now? What is some in between? What are moments when there is a connection between the two, and how do we bring those out in thinking about the new pieces that we might want to make in any of these locations, right? So trying to piece apart these moments, not necessarily go back to an original, but find the moments of confluence.
And bring it back. Yeah.
Right, of use, right? The idea that the shipping canal had to be cut for barges, okay, but how do we then bring some of the elements, the crucial aspects of those elements? How do we bring them into the future? And with that, we're actually going to move to land. And it's to Brooklyn and to Southeast Brooklyn, to land and to a piece of private architecture, because these questions are important not just for aspects of public space, but in how public space comes together with private space. Because private space is really included in the public space, right? It's that moment. There's a threshold moment where the private needs to share with the outside, right? It comes together. So,
and that becomes like a diaphanous moment where your front door, your front windows, your backyard, all of those things that connect to the street, and then the street to a boulevard, the boulevard back to other neighborhoods back to other boroughs across rivers. What happens at each of those scales and each of those moments?
So here we were asked to make a house to design a house in Midwood, which is in this area of Brooklyn. Right now we're looking at a map from 1908, excuse me. And what you can see is that this is New York City, this is Manhattan, and you can see that Manhattan and most of Brooklyn has been built up and gridded, but there's one area, this kind of Southeast Brooklyn here, that's still farmland. Very few roads.
With two racetracks.
Racetracks, right? Now you have this area of Coney Island that already is built up somewhat, but there's a whole big stretch in here that's bucolic, let's say. Even though this is, New York City has been consolidated, it's 1908, right? So Brooklyn is part of New York already, and this hasn't been developed, let's say, yet. But if we look at a map, even from 8 years earlier, okay, the red lines here are train lines, and there's one road
called Ocean Parkway Malls.
That was started, completed in 1874, and it takes you from Prospect Park to Coney Island. So basically from park to beach. It's a public space. It's a linear park.
Right, and it was designed by Olmsted and Vaux. So they understand parks, but this to them is a linear park. It's a park in motion.
So yeah, they had completed the Prospect Park, and now they're doing this road, right? And let's take a look at what it looked like. Here it is. This stretch, it's about 5 miles. And let's see what it looked like when it was first designed. So around it, there's nothing, no buildings really. It's really
a few manor buildings, like one in the distance there, like a farmhouse.
Yeah, and there was like a movie studio somewhere. There were a few big houses, nothing much. It was really a way of getting from two leisure places, from Prospect Park to the beach. And what you have is you have a cycle path,
a bridle path,
so for horses, and then horse and buggies.
That's right, and you get the sense already that the bicycle craze is coming after this gets built. People start to feel the thrill of the speed of this long, straight stretch between Prospect Park all the way to Coney Island, and the speed demons that came out of this period to the beginning of the 20th century. It's incredible how many people started biking here.
Right, you can see that it became a craze. And this is on Ocean Parkway. So it really became a public social space, not just a place to get from point A to point B, but a place to stay and watch and be seen and enjoy doing sports. So it was very popular. Now
that's what this looks like now.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is what Ocean Parkway has become now. It's a place of traffic, right? The one end of Ocean Parkway is actually connects to the BQE. And it's a place of a lot of traffic, right? You see the bike path would be around here.
And it was diminished. It was cut down.
And also, instead of the bridle path, they put a side service road. So here is where the horse and carriages were. This is where the bikes were. It's still there. You can still bike it. And then you have a side road with more cars. So we decided when we were given this project that we needed to go back into that past and say, let's experience Ocean Parkway. And even though there's no city bike station in Midwood yet, we decided when we go to this house for site visits,
We would take the city bikes with us
right, because we
off the grid.
because even though, I mean, the subway does go there, but it's very long
It's a 13-mile ride from Manhattan.
and pretty much from our office as well in Long Island City. So
Right.
we said, okay, let's see if we can start to understand this neighborhood, understand Midwood, understand the project by re-understanding Ocean Parkway. Instead of getting there by car or by taxi or by subway, let's see if we can bring back the original intentions of Ocean Parkway as a way of understanding the house.
So here's that aerial view again, but this is showing you an itinerary. The first place that we start from is our Long Island City studio, but why not? We're going to go into Manhattan over the Queensboro.
Because we live around here more or
Right,
less.
and then come down Second Avenue, make our way to the Manhattan Bridge, come down the Manhattan Bridge, skirt around Flatbush, all the way down to Prospect Park, around Prospect Park, and then down Ocean Parkway, which is as it was meant to be. And you see, we make our way all the way to where that oval, one of the raceway ovals used to be, and is now what has become Midwood, this very dense environment that we'll show you next.
Right. So if Midwood was really this bucolic, the last farmland, now it's been built up. That happened in the 20s and 30s with developer typology, which we'll talk about in a minute. But here you can see Ocean Parkway bifurcating this image horizontally. We're looking now due east to Jamaica Bay in the distance. And what you see here is this linear, well, at least from the air, it appears to be a linear park of Ocean Parkway. From here, we can't really see all the traffic. We can only imagine the trees and the original intention of Olmsted and Box.
And one thing you might notice here, the lay of the land, you kind of see where it was open before because the typology marks it. If you squint, you see that the typology that's lower, that these long, narrow lots, really comes from the developments that came out of the farmland first. And where you see the higher and higher density were previous settlements before the farm, next to the farmland.
So here we're going to zoom in. Here's our house. One of these developer lots that were made in the 1920s and into the early 30s. And we come in closer and we can examine this lot. It's basically, the lots are about 32 feet wide by 100 feet deep. And since it's freestanding, each house can be a maximum of, let's say, 20 to 22 feet. So you have enough room for a driveway. So what you're getting is basically a townhouse shape basically.
As a standalone home.
As a standalone home. So very long and narrow, interestingly, but as a standalone home. Exactly. We'll see that further. Now, also what's interesting is that at this time, the developers were looking to give middle-class people a feeling of stateliness, and they looked to the Tudor revival style, which was big in the 1920s, and houses being built in Long Island and in Westchester.
And miniaturizing them a little bit on these long, narrow lots, right? And saying you've arrived.
Exactly. So we have these houses, and what happened is our client wanted to build the maximum allowable on the lot and not stand out too much, not make it feel like it was a big house. So nod possibly to the Tudor typology. So in our thinking, we were thinking, it's not just about style. Let's also think about this neighborhood and this connection in Ocean Parkway. Let's start to think about the neighborhood style as Ocean Parkway, not just Tudor typology. But at the same time, let's look at the massing. So just to think about the building here, this is the shape of the house that we ended up making was a zoning diagram, let's say, right? The allowable, and we built it into two sections. The bottom, which is the public side, opening up onto the street and thinking about the neighborhood as a street and connection with people in the neighborhood on the street. And then the upper house is kind of that cloud looking up and understanding the neighborhood and looking above the houses at the
tree line as well, yeah.
And heading towards Ocean Parkway, really understanding the place as a neighborhood, as sky, as park. Yes.
Yeah. The porches in this neighborhood are very active. People stand on them and talk to each other. They even yell at each other across the street. So the porches are that moment of active interchange on the block.
So to look at the bottom of the house, we started to think about this fanning out, this opening up, right? So we often think about the interior as this place where we hide from the exterior, where we go away, we find a moment of ourselves. But how do you relate the inside to what's going on the street? So we started to make these fanning louvers to open up towards the street. We call this room out. And also the brick is also fanning up. So this idea is that the house is opening up to the street. Here you can see the brick opening up.
The idea was to say that the bricks are almost attracted to the openness of the street by orienting themselves a little bit like filings, iron filings to a magnet.
And then that front room, we call it the studiolo, thinking about the Florentine studiolo, which was a room of introspection, but would have wood and tarsia murals on the wall, like inlaid wood that would be perspectives onto other scenes. So this idea that whatever you're doing in the room, you're thinking about these other ideas like art, music, science, things like that. There would be scenes in the wall. So now we're saying, okay, this is the studiolo. We're opening up like a book, the pages of a book. We're opening up onto the street. But also there's introspection, and at the same time, it's like a sharing of knowledge from inside to outside.
Right, so it's at once literal and figurative, mental and physical, that you're sitting in this space, opening a book, taking it off, one of the thousands of books off your shelf in the studiolo, being introspective, but thinking of other worlds, other ideas, and those windows are kind of your thoughts passing through those windows radially to the street. If anybody's interested, the Gubbio Studiolo sits in its entirety at the Met. So you can go to the Metropolitan Museum and see it next time you actually venture outside your door.
So here we can see that ceiling, kind of that fanning opening here. And here we see a view looking up towards the ceiling, the upper windows and the lower windows, and they're fanning out in this radial progression. And then just to go through some of the pictures on the inside, this idea, you walk in through a street and then you have to kind of kick off into this octagonal room. So everything kind of plays off
of the openness outside. You end up having a miniaturized version of the streets of outside, finding your way inside by degrees.
You come in, you understand the octagonal space that will then lead to the radial studiolo space. Some of the details.
There's the street in the background, and then you find yourself more of the inside of the house, right? Embraced by the wood.
The bathrooms, why not? The kitchen inside. And then we start to make our way upstairs from that public area downstairs, up the staircase, a side window allowing us to look down the alley.
Back at the street.
And then a window just onto the alley. And we make our way to this big window in the front. The first view that we have of the window is of the neighborhood. So quotidian look at the other houses.
And then when you arrive in the master bedroom and you start to look up, you find that the window finds its way up into the nether reaches of the room, and you start to see the canopy of the trees. And because of the positions of these windows, the height of them off the ground, you're starting to choose your view. You're starting to see the trees alone and start to get into the contemplative mood of what the top of the house is. It's like a cloud sitting on top of the public space.
Yeah, and you start to get a three-dimensional feeling of that treescape. And we make our way even further up to the attic space, and now we're above the neighborhood.
Looking at the tree line and the roof and the roofscape of the entire neighborhood, the very dense lots.
Up in one of the bathrooms, so an introspective moment up below. One thing that's interesting about these houses, because they're so long and narrow, it's hard to get light in, right? So one of the biggest challenges of the house was how can we bring in light from any side possible? Maybe when you have a townhouse, you don't expect light on the sides, but the moment you have the expectation, you want to bring the light in as if it were freestanding in a field. So this is the back, it's the greenhouse. You need to have 6 feet. If you want to extend the house a little more, you need to have a greenhouse, which was perfect because we were able to bring in the northern light. You can see that from the aerial view.
Right, the lower left-hand corner is where they're playing chess. So that's the greenhouse right there.
And you can start to understand this house again from the back. Here is the window that looks out from the attic, the window that looks out towards the street.
And this scene from the other side is like threading the needle. We have another large window on the other side of this attic space that allows you to see both ways. So you can turn 180 degrees, look out, see roofscape eastward, then you look westward and you see roofscape westward.
And to give you an understanding, then you're back in the attic, in the alley. This is the narrow alley that's only 2.5 feet. You can really see how narrow it can get. So the view isn't here in the alley. The view is up above over here when you're up seeing it aerially. Back on the street, we're ready to get back on our bikes. We've brought the city bikes here from the alley where the cars are supposed to go.
And there's the angel looking back.
There's the angel looking back, the angel window, and we're ready to see the city once again. As we move our way outside, we pan away from the Avenue Q or Quentin Road, and we return back to Ocean Parkway.
We're moving eastward, looking north. Ocean Parkway. And we look back north at Prospect Park and Manhattan skyline.
And we see the city always the city seen for the first time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow, that was amazing. I love all your literary tie-ins, like from start to finish. I mean, we talked about the title before we let everybody in, but Lewis Carroll, oh, it's great. I love it. Do we have any questions? Let me see. There were a couple of comments, not questions. Some. Well, Lisa said, excellent presentation, as did Robin. And of course, I agree. That was great.
Thank you.
Beth had said an actual parkway in reference to Ocean Parkway with Olmsted and Vox. And I actually, I live right by Ocean Parkway. I run it about 3 times a week. Not the whole thing. Oh my God, no.
Oh, you do?
I actually live at the beginning of Ocean Parkway. And
Beautiful.
It's, I always love to remind people who don't know that it was, it was one of the first bike lanes ever created. And
Yep.
It was to link Coney Island to Prospect Park as a way of, continuing the public experience. And I love the interaction, how you guys go out of your way to sort of snuff out the history of whatever project you're doing. I love the explanation of the lots in Midwood, just absolutely.
There's some great literature about it too. Architectural historians. There's Thomas Campanella has written about the Tudor revival in Queens. It's a really,
Brooklyn, yeah.
and in Brooklyn as well.
Yeah. It's the Tudor, and that's worth like a whole presentation itself.
Yeah, for sure.
It's amazing how much Tudor is hanging around in the city. So everybody's loving it, so you're not getting any questions. Robert said, all very interesting, but love the abandoned rail info in the Bronx. I knew we had a couple people here, especially for the abandoned railway, Cass Gilbert. Can you see the train station from the Sheridan Expressway, Robin asks.
Oh, certainly. If you don't mind, I'll tell a little story about the Sheridan. The Sheridan's a funny thing. It's one of Moses's developments, clearly, of infrastructure in the Bronx to move people through it as quickly as possible. And the Sheridan was an aborted piece of infrastructure. It's only 3 exits long, and even that was incomplete. So the Sheridan, it goes from the Bruckner to the Cross Bronx, basically.
Right.
So, and it goes under and over, and then makes its way to the Jackie Gleason bus depot at the 3rd exit. And there's a cloverleaf, and one of the cloverleaf was never actually built. And it was the one that we saw, the column, the Robert Smithson Monument to the Future, right? Which is, it's sitting there in the middle of the Bronx River.
But what's interesting about the station is, yes, when the Sheridan was built, it actually cut off a little bit of the station.
We
So
can show
I'm
you
going to
that,
show you
actually.
what I was going for here is I'm going to show you the original thing. So
There it
there
is.
was this portico here. We always ask ourselves, because there's no door here anymore, this is the main entrance, but people would be dropped off here. And this is actually where the exit, there's one exit on the Sheridan, and it comes out right here at Westchester Avenue, because Westchester Avenue is actually a very important avenue. It cuts east, like due east, and passes it under the 6 train. So there's a lot of traffic there. And the Sheridan actually has an exit here. So if you get out at the Sheridan exit, but
Yeah.
I think it's under construction now. I think they might be getting rid of it and turning it into a boulevard. That's a project they've been working on in the Bronx for quite some time. But they had to cut this away to make the Sheridan.
And actually, it's a contested zone here. It turns out that Robert Moses actually wanted to tear this whole thing down, wasn't successful, so he shaved off that porch on the right-hand side.
Always like Robert Moses, he's got to put his hand on something. Somehow.
He basically clipped it. He
Even
gave
if
it a
he
crew cut.
cannot get everything done that he wanted to. It's like spelling a bridge wrong. Arizona. Beth Goff asked, what is the status of your Cass Gilbert project?
We're in the deep middle of it. We've been going about 10, maybe 6 or 7 years, and we think it's going to take another 6 or 7 years. We're in constant contact with the Bronx River Alliance, which is it's a local group that reclaims the beauty of the Bronx River and makes it good for the locals, right? And they are associated with parks. And then we have Youth Ministries for Peace and Justice that started very, very early on in the 70s and 80s to clean up the river and get Concrete Plant Park built. And they are super interested in using this as something possibly that might have program for them. So the 3 of us meet at least,
Like
once a month to try to figure out how to get funding for the next phase of feasibility, then figure out ownership. Right now it's owned by Amtrak. So we'd have to get it conveyed to another owner. There's a lot of remediation that has to happen. It's a brown site. And it happens there's Department of Homeland Security because it's over the Northeast Corridor. Right. So it's not an uncomplicated project.
No.
But there's a lot of people love this building, so there's a lot of support in the community. We've gotten additional funding since our original funding of from the James Marston Fitch Foundation. We got some J.M. Kaplan funding. So, and we constantly, now we've brought on someone from Selman, an engineer. So we're building it. It's a slow build, but it's happening. It's something that we're working on and pushing forward.
And as Amanda alluded to, MTA is looking to reinstitute some local train line on the Amtrak rail that they might need to do something. They might buy back this station from
Not the station.
not the station, but the tracks. They might use the tracks and might be able to buy this from Amtrak and then either fix it up or stabilize it, which may be a step in the right direction for us.
Yeah, well, that's, and I believe, I believe Michael made mention of that, and that's part of Cuomo's initiative to provide more rail to the Bronx, to
That's
extend
right.
Metro North to the Bronx, and then of course bring them to Penn, which can't handle them right now. But yeah, MTA will restore commuter service on this line for Metro North. The railroad is still active, used by Amtrak for trains from New York to Boston and Springfield. That's what Michael had said early on in the presentation.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting about this project because not only wanting to bring back original ecology, we're trying to bring back original infrastructure, and the city wants to too. So there's an interesting coming together. Bringing back the past doesn't mean just bringing back a building or bringing back trees. It's really about how do you do it together, right? And how do you make things work for people at the same time, right? There's always a practical element about it too, so it works for people. It becomes something people can use.
Right, and there's this desire line too. The idea that the water had at one point had a little pier that went out into it and had this thing called the Bronx Queen, which was a decommissioned naval vessel that became a fishing boat, like a leisure time fishing boat that would leave from here down at the river. And the Bronx Queen, people would get on it in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, and they would go out to
Till 1989 when
till
it sank.
1989 when it sank. It sank off of Perth Amboy. Yeah.
Lord.
So there's a lot of desire here to use the water and to use the greenway and to use the roads, tie back into the parks. Yeah, there's a lot of desire, pent up desire.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's why I love your stuff so much. Oh, we could talk for hours, but I will hold back. Robin said 1.7 miles for the Sheridan. We take it when we drive home from the Berkshires. Yes, I actually taught at a school that was right behind the Jackie Gleason bus depot. So I would always, if I was driving from Brooklyn, I would take the Sheridan. I always go, what is the point here? What are we doing? But
you could walk faster.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
Mahmoud says, is the Umbrella Dome still able to visit and do, I think you hope you can preserve and repurpose that old trade building, which I think you actually spoke to, in the Bronx for kayakers and others.
Yes, that's the idea.
So Mahmoud's question about the Harvest Dome is very funny because we always knew that it was a golem that was an accumulation of the debris of the city that sort of haunts the city and becomes this thing that floats out there and tells you what happened to all those umbrellas you broke and threw down on the street. Well, they became this dome and they haunt your dreams, right? So it's a haunting aspect, and part of the life cycle of that dome was that it went back into the waste stream. And the idea is that all those umbrellas, all the steel, all the plastic, everything, we actually we recycled the entire thing. But there's a process. Part of what we try to convey in the talk is about the idea of building it was as important to us as the thing itself.
Right.
Right.
Very much so. There was a question from Nick in the Q&A. Guys, great to see more about the practice and its trajectories along those off the beaten paths in NYC. Apart from bringing the Cass Gilbert building back to life, curious what you are working on or what is next on the boards. How would you like to see the practice continue to evolve?
Ooh,
so actually very interesting thing. Right now, we're actually working on a project on the Camden waterfront, and it's going to open up in April 16th. And one thing that's quite interesting and what attracted our interest to it is, Walt Whitman, he talks about crossing Brooklyn Ferry and the East River and the movement and the coming together, and the East River as public space. And actually, he moved to Camden, New Jersey.
Yes.
And he thought that the Delaware reminded him, all the activity there reminded him of the East River. So we started to think about that. And we're doing another piece there. It's called Turntable. You can see that on Vimeo.
If you type in turntable, one word, turntable, and you type in SLO Architecture, turntable, Camden, you will see a Vimeo. You'll see an entire website devoted to it. We're in the middle of it right now.
Right. So just to give you a little, it's a part of a program called the New View Camden, because Camden is suffering some of the same problems as the Bronx in terms of people dumping things, a lot of illegal dumping. So they were interested in getting projects that would make people aware of past history. So to think about dumping, and I think it fits in with this other work as well. It's you're not just dumping objects when you're dumping in a landscape. You're actually dumping history as well. Right? So you're leaving a station derelict. That's like dumped history. So how do you bring that back? And where you're building on the site along where a ferry used to be.
Cooper's Point Park, at the foot of the Ben Franklin Bridge. There's a prevailing wind. There used to be a windmill there a century or two ago.
Right across in the river. So we're bringing back that sense of the windmill and the idea of dumping. And we're going to do something. It's a windmill that you can enter, actually. Ooh. And a beacon.
A big drum, a cylinder. It actually turns like a turntable. So it doesn't look like a windmill. It looks like an oil drum or a gasometer, and it turns in the wind.
So, to answer the question, we like to, that's a long-winded answer. It's something to look forward to. We invite everyone to come down to Camden, but it's a way of looking at a project. How do you come at a site and start to understand its histories, what's been buried? How do you bring out the histories when you're making architecture so that you make something that is meaningful to the people there and that could bring together pieces that have been lost?
Right.
That may even be there to the naked eye, but they're true use isn't being used in the same way, kind of like Ocean Parkway, right? It's been taken over by cars more. It's, one thing we noticed when we were going down Ocean Parkway, for example, is we could never make the light. We'd have to stop.
Always, it's the worst.
Avenue B, Avenue C, Avenue D. So it's not, it never works. It's really crazy, and it makes you want to skip the light because you can't stand that every time. So Ocean Parkway exists, but its original intent has been completely lost. So even when you see something in the city, you want to ask yourself, how do I bring out the intent here?
Right.
And we can do that in Camden. We have a house in the Hudson Valley. We're thinking maybe that we're designing as well. Maybe we'll bike up there.
Yes,
even we'll bike to Camden. It's 108 miles on the Raritan Valley Trail.
Right. Each one of our projects seems to be connected to an old train line that's been turned into a trail or partially turned into a trail. The one that we're designing a house in the Hudson Valley, it's actually on the old Putnam Trail, and we biked it. It's like maybe 50 or 60 miles. And it's through the woods. It's like one 5-degree incline all the way through the woods. It's like a Roman road through the middle of the woods that never changes pitch all the way through. So it is a little bit, it can drive you mad because what we're all used to doing on our bicycles is to ride over hills, under hills, go downhill. This is one long uninterrupted hill for 60 miles, basically. So yes,
that does sound slightly maddening, but
yes, it can make you a little crazy.
I'm sure beautiful. So Mahmoud says that everybody, I think the umbrella domes should be made in every city of the world to encourage people to trash less and recycle and reuse trash in creative ways. Thank you again for the inspirations. Well, thank you, Mahmoud, for saying that. And
we agree, Mahmoud.
Yes. Robert Morbeck, who is a Philly area native, says he will keep his eye out for the Camden project, as will I. And when it opens up, let us know. We'll cover it. That would be really, that'll be pretty cool.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Wonderful.
I haven't been to Camden since I was a preteen, and Camden's got a lot of issues, obviously, with, or it has. I'm not sure if it's improved any in the past.
Well, this is part of the improvement, right? There's a desire. The first thing is the desire.
Exactly. And that's, I know, just like the Bronx, I think it needs that love and attention. And again,
there's a lot of love there.
Yeah.
There's the Rutgers campus, Rutgers Camden, which is right nearby. And there's a lot of interest in making things better for the students, for the locals. They're looking for new ways to use the town.
Great. Yeah. Cause I remember we went down to Camden to visit, well, Beth just said, visit the USS New Jersey in Camden. It's very cool. Then the aquarium, that's why we had gone. And I remember just being in love with the waterfront.
Yeah.
And then we traveled in a little bit, and I was, and I love urban areas, but I was like, oh, this is a little dicey here. So
it's tough. There are ways that, many people need to get involved to make it better for themselves.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that something like this always inspires more community outreach.
Definitely.
And community to improve for themselves. So I think that's awesome. So I thank you both very much for spending the evening with us. This was awesome. I have put the link to your website in the chat. I heartily invite the insiders to go to your website. It's very, very ample. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to see. There's a lot of great videos, multimedia. I did also post the link to the turntable project just now, so people can take a look at that as well. And yeah, we'll do this again. We'll do a part 2. Let's catch up. Maybe after turntable is done and you're the spring. And,
wonderful.
I thank you guys very much. I thank you guys insiders for joining us this evening and being a part of the presentation with SLO Architecture. And for those of you, I know a couple people have signed up, but for those of you still with us, tomorrow, Wednesday, is a very, very busy day. We're gonna do the City Reliquary. I will be live streaming from there at noon with the board, I think the assistant board chair, Beth. That'll be a lot of fun. The City Reliquary is super cool. And then tomorrow night, we are doing another World's Fair presentation. Well, that will be me doing another World's Fair tour and presentation. Thursday, we do not have any programming, but we're back on Friday with artist Matt McNelly, who has some really stunning pieces up at 5 Bryant Park, and he'll be talking about his process. And our artist in residence, Aaron Assis, will be also moderating that talk. So Mahmood said loves the SLO Architecture website now. Loving it. Good night. Can't wait for part 2.
Thanks,
You
Mahmood.
guys are
Thank you
great.
so much. Thank you,
Everybody
Untapped
stay
Cities
safe,
and New York.
and yes, thank you. And
3 cheers
take
for
care.
Untapped Cities.
Woohoo. Oh, thank you guys. Have a good night, everybody. Stay
Good
safe.
night.